Hello, it's May 26th, 2022, and this is the Backdrop Weekly Developer Meeting. We get together every week to talk about the latest things in Backdrop development. Before we get started, we'll do some introductions. My name is Nate Lampton from Oakland, California. I'm Quick Sketch on the internet and a core committer for Backdrop. We're joined here with Robert, and then we'll go to Tim.
I'm Robert Lang, bug folder on the internet, coming to you from Altadena, California.
Thanks, Robert. Tim, and then Martin.
Tim Erickson in Deerwood, Minnesota. St. Paul Tim. That's all. Whoever's next.
Thanks, Tim.
Martin Price from Northeast England. That's all.
With the best handle on the internet, Yorkshire Pudding.
Yorkshire Pudding.
Come on, Nate.
Okay, thanks, Martin. And then Jen?
Jen Lambton, joining from Oakland, California, a fan of Yorkshire Pudding myself.
All right, thanks, everybody. It's great to have everyone here today. Let's see. We usually like to do little community updates. Jen, do you want to give us an update on some community aspects?
Sure. So this last week we had a new showcase added to our website. It's a site called cloudbrat.com. And if anyone wants to see why that site chose Backdrop, visit our showcase. We also have a couple of new projects released this week, the barcodes module and the UberCart restrict quantity module. And both of those are now available for download on backdropcms.org or inside your Backdrop website. That's it.
Excellent. Thanks. All right. We have a forum post every week that solicits topics for us to discuss during these meetings. There weren't any comments on that thread this week. But we did have the request to give an update on the porting of the organic groups module. There's been an initiative to get that module updated so that, well, for multiple purposes, but one of them is that our translation server is the only site in our suite of Backdrop CMS infrastructure sites that is still running Drupal. It's running Drupal 7. And it's dependent upon organic groups. So that's one really good reason for us to get organic groups updated. There was another one too that I feel like I'm missing, Jen or Tim. There was a secondary. Well, I mean, there's the primary reason that it's a useful module to have, right?
And then it has come up a number of times in discussions about like marketing and outreaches that people have said there are certain sites that really need organic groups that would, otherwise be considering Backdrop, but can't. And organic groups isn't the only module like that, but it's one of the big ones that we hear about a lot. So
yeah, well, there's been some updates in progress this week. Sure. What news is there on that front, Tim?
Well, RG Piano posted in Zulip that so first of all, he became a co-maintainer officially just about a week ago. He had been working actively on it. Laren is officially the maintainer. But Laren is going to be on a sort of semi-sabbatical for a while and was looking for somebody to help co-maintain it. RG Piano stepped up, agreed to do that, and in the last week has committed a bunch of changes. He's done some testing in actually migrating or upgrading a Drupal 7 site with organic groups, testing the upgrade process. I helped him create a demo content module. So it was the organic groups module is not really intuitive when you just plug it in. Most of us that were testing it had to go read instructions on how to get it set up. And we decided that we could add a demo content submodule, which would automatically create some groups and some content so that if a user wanted to, they could much easier try it out and see it. And that's been added. It's now part of it. So anyways, we're with substantial progress. There are a few, I think they're fairly fringe bugs that are being worked on, like for very specific use cases. I think in general, people that have just tried it say the basic functionality, it all seems to be pretty stable. And so RG Piano is hoping to do a again, a beta release within a week, maybe early next week, I would hope. And at which point we can get more, you people will be able to download it and install it in the installer. If you're someone who is able to and willing, it is in the Backdrop contrib group. So you can go to GitHub and download it today and try it out. And any additional testing before next week would, help us make that beta release even more stable. So I think that's it.
All right. Wow, that's great. Yeah, lots of really positive news there. All right. Let's go to, in lieu of other questions, we'll do a rundown through status report on the next release. It's a long ways away. It's September 15th, 2022. But yeah, there's already some exciting progress and kind of some objectives for the release are shaping up. One of them is issue 1301, the inclusion of a reference module into core. This has been showing a lot of progress recently. Herb Duell is spearheading this effort. He's now the advocate for it. And I think we've covered this many meetings now, that the approach that we're taking is taking the contrib version of entity reference module wholesale directly into core. And that issue 1301 has a pull request that does exactly that. This past week, we also made some improvements to it to handle the situation of what if there's a contrib entity reference module on your site and the core entity reference module gets pulled in. This is a situation that we've handled several times before, so we repeated all of the same processes for notifying the user that there's two versions of the module. We have the status report that identifies that there's multiple versions of the module. I also wrote a changelog describing, what to do if you have been using entity reference, or if you haven't been using entity reference, what to do about the other reference modules. So we've got some documentation that kind of preemptively describes what would happen if this entity reference gets put into core, dealing with the situations of what if you're using user or node reference module, or entity reference, like what do you do in all three of those situations? Which right now is not actually a lot, because the initial pass will basically put the module in, but that'll be it, at least initially. We'll see how far things come along. Herb also started up a sub-issue. One of the first follow-up tasks for core, once we get entity reference in, is to start using it instead of the term references that are provided by Taxonomy module. And because it's strange right now that Taxonomy module eventually will use entity reference out of the box to provide the tags field. But in the meantime, what will happen is that you'll end up with two kinds of reference fields on your sites, term references and entity references, if you turn on entity reference module. And that's a confusing situation. So we want to be able to make it so that users can turn off term references and just use entity references instead. But in order to do that, we have to separate term references from taxonomy module, because right now it's all together. So anyway, the first task that we have is to separate out term references from taxonomy module. It's all the exact same functions and everything like that, just got moved into a separate module so that it can be turned off. And that way entity reference can be used instead. We're not there yet as far as like just use entity reference instead of term references, but this is the first step to making it so that that's even a possibility.
And so this would facilitate at some point in the future disabling term reference on new installs and enabling entity reference on new installs. And then, so short term though, before we have all of the features, what's the plan for reference going in core initially? Is it the hope that we would immediately start with reference in core and not term reference, even though we don't have it there yet? Or will we start with both reference fields for terms?
The only qualifying step that we really have is that entity reference or the reference module works. And so that's
Let's start with both.
Yeah, we'll start with both, and probably, unless term reference can be replaced, entity reference probably won't be turned on by default. But
really,
we could discuss that.
Yeah, I feel like the node and all the other references are important enough that we might decide to go the other way on that one.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I agree. It's confusing to have two things that are the same. But we might also be able to do a better job of indicating the difference between entity reference and term reference somehow. That might make that less of an issue. Okay, yeah, I read the issue for separating term reference module, and I wasn't really sure what it was doing or why. But your explanation of like being able to turn it off if you're using entity reference instead is helpful. So maybe we can put that in the issue.
Yeah, I think, and I'm not quite sure when we'd be able to remove it. It's possible that we might make it a, I can't quite remember how this works. There's some, like a hidden module. Hidden modules are allowed to be, they stay on if they're already on. And I think you can actually even turn them off. But then once they've been turned off, they don't show up in the modules list anymore. So basically it would be like, you know, if you installed a brand new backdrop site, imagine that we had already fully switched over to entity reference. Term reference would still be in the code base, but you wouldn't see it on the modules page to prevent you from turning it on. Because if entity reference does it all, then we don't want people to be using term reference.
Yeah, it'll probably be a while before we get there, though.
It probably will be a while before we get there. Yeah, totally.
Term references are hard.
Yeah, but it is very exciting. That issue 1301, I've reviewed it and marked it as works for me because I think that it's there. Like, I mean, it's got full test coverage. It's already in use by lots of sites, hundreds of sites are using entity reference module, and it's a port from the Drupal 7 module, so it's also very stable. So yeah, I didn't test like absolutely everything, but functionality wise, you know, it's just entity reference. And then I tested the situation of like what happens if you have the contrib version at the same time as the core version. So it's kind of this could be kind of a little bit overwhelming, I think, because like we've been talking about this for years now, and it's just like all of a sudden, like it could land tomorrow and be like, yeah, it's done, you know. So it's just kind of one of these things that it just doesn't seem like it was ever going to happen, and now all of a sudden it's, you know, it's all done because we pivoted approaches. And of course, through the effort of HerbTool doing the work to make it core appropriate in contrib previously. So he did a bunch of work changing the contrib module specifically to make it core appropriate, and I think that was the real kicker.
Well, it seems like it could be one of the biggest new features we've had in a while. So
it's a huge thing. And I personally think our reference situation is the most confusing part of using Backdrop, like, because you have to use one of them, and it's really ambiguous which solution is the one that you should be going with. And so I think this would be a massive win for our users. Not to mention, like, if your primary selling point of your content management system is its ability for structured data, relationships are incredibly important. And so this is a massive win just as far as like being able to build sites that structure complex data. Yeah, I mean, the value reference field is very, very high. Okay, let's see. So yeah, really great news on that one. I'd really appreciate other people taking a look at that issue 1301. I kind of feel like between Herb and myself, we both have now been in the kitchen baking on that one. So I don't think that we're fair judges of saying if it's RTBC or not. So yeah, we need some extra eyeballs on that one.
Yeah. So exactly what does that mean? Because you're talking about code eyeballs, right? Or just testers.
And testing. I think both.
Okay. So it would be
Yeah.
helpful to have more people just test out that PR and say, I've tried this and this and this and it works.
Yep.
If there's
Yeah.
specific things you think should be tested, maybe mention those, or did you do that yet?
No. Yeah, go ahead, Jen.
I was going to say, so I don't have any backdrop sites that are using entity reference because I built them all with references. But would it be useful to throw the core pull request on one of those sites and work on a conversion path and test it that way? Or are we too soon to worry about existing data from other sources?
I don't think it's ever too soon to start working on a migration
Okay.
path. But the value that would have right now is demonstrating that there's not going to be severe consequences for running entity reference and node reference at the same time.
Or
Like
reference.
if you tried turning on to both of them together and something catastrophic happened, that would need to be addressed, I think.
Okay.
But I
Yeah,
don't.
there could be
I think
some
I've seen.
new-
I think I've seen poor sites that have multiple reference solutions installed before, and it wasn't ever an issue other than the fact that it was confusing.
Yeah.
Sure. Okay.
Okay. Great. So that's issue 1301 plus the follow-up ticket 5633. 5633, the separate out term reference, is absolutely not a prerequisite for 1301. 1301, as far as I know, doesn't have any other blocking components.
Well, so Nate, one of two things are likely to happen, right? One of which is that we keep sort of saying like, yeah, let's do a little bit more testing, and then we end up merging this in fairly late in the release cycle. The other is that we just get aggressive and get it in really soon, and then it's there for the next 3 months, and people are testing it whether they want to or not because it's in all the dev sites. So I don't know. We should just maybe try to be. I would encourage us to maybe be try and get it in sooner, which we often say we're going to do and then don't.
Yeah. Well, from that perspective, I mean, I totally agree. I would prefer that we be aggressive, and I always ask that we be aggressive, and then never, it always
Right.
is the last minute thing anyway.
Right.
Cards being a really good example of
Exactly.
that, I think, in the last release.
That's what I was thinking of.
Yeah. Well, I do feel like I wouldn't mind. There's kind of this thing where I guess a lot of people are nervous about being the one to mark things RTBC because they feel like they have a lot of personal responsibility then if they said that it was okay and then something happens
Especially
later.
this one.
But this one, the really awkward thing about this issue is that we've been talking about it for years. There's dozens of people that have participated in the issue, and now that we have something to look at and we're at the cost potentially of putting it in, we haven't gotten any attention. And it's been that's been like a month where there's been a pull request and it's ready to go, and we've been asking for feedback and nobody's really commented, and it's kind of a really I think the problem is that no one is comfortable because there's been so much discussion about this, and now that it's time to actually do the reviewing, there's no feedback. And so it feels like there should be more people that have an opinion who aren't showing up for some reason. And maybe I don't know, maybe it's a good thing, It's like if everybody's happy, then nobody says anything. Well, anyway, I think just basic testing would be super valuable just to get some more voices on the issue. I personally don't have a problem marking it RTBC as long as some other people have also at least verbally approved it, you know? Yeah.
That's helpful.
Okay. All right. Let's see. Next up, also in the 123 milestone, an issue showing some early signs of progress. Jen is taking on field group functionality, issue 647. She has an update for us this week.
Sure. So last week after the meeting, I went right to work and just grabbed the field group module and threw it in core and turned it on and was like, haha, pull request. And then of course, you're like, well, hold on, there's a whole bunch of stuff here that I got to start working on. So the first thing I did was made a menu callback for configuring the field group so that it works like other fields. So when you click on the configure link, you get another page with settings and you hit save and it takes you back. Previously just sort of crammed the form into the description field on the field listing page, which I think is how it used to do it in Drupal 6. And so I started there and was like, okay, that's a lot of change already. So I stopped and pushed up a pull request just so that I could get some more eyes on it. And Herb went and reviewed it immediately and gave me some great feedback. He found some validation functions that I missed when I converted the form, which I've now got working on the new form instead, and identified some other like legacy code that we could remove. So I'll go back and work on that again today. And I think there's a list. I went through the issue last week too and identified all of the things that people recommended. And I sorted them into things that we could do now and then things that were designated as follow-up issues. And I linked the follow-up issues that Gregory created, of course, into the main issues so you can see sort of what we're looking at. And then there's a section there that's like, do we need to do any more than what's on this list? Because I think we have like a sort of a minimum viable field group in core where it looks a lot like it works today, and it's a little kludgy and maybe not the user experience that we expect for backdrop core, but we get the feature in. And then there's like a whole bunch of stuff we could do to like make that user experience really polished. And I don't really know where that line should be on like when we get it in versus when we iterate. So I could give some feedback on that. But anyone could look at the issue and let me know where we should stop.
Martin, are you talking to us?
Sorry, which issue's that? Sorry, just so I can have a look at it.
It's issue number 647. It's an oldie, 3-digit.
I think I'm going to need to take some time to look at that before I provide too much feedback too. I'm a little bit nervous about carrying the baggage of contrib into core on this one, but
yeah, there's a lot of stuff that field group did that they had to do in order to get the managed fields form to work for groups. That's really different from how the rest of field works. And I think that there are some major options for technical cleanup by modifying the way fields work to allow for settings to exist for non-data entities and stuff like that. But I'm not sure those should be blockers for getting this feature in. So there's definitely a slippery slope of like, how would we do this the right way versus how bad do we want this feature? And so Nate, that's going to be up to you and some of the other core developers to look at and be like, how comfortable are you with these current solutions? I'm not sure I'd really call them hacks. I'd call them creative workarounds because they are using all the APIs we provide. They're just using like ForMelter really heavily in adding things into renderables and adding their own links and callbacks and behaviors where we could have an actual API to leverage those things, which would be a little cleaner. So yeah, and I'm willing to work on the API changes too if you decide you really want to not have. So right now the way the like configure link is, it looks like a drop button, but the way those links are added by fields is like part of the field definition. But because there's no field definition here, because there's no data, it's just a renderable array added into that column. And so it's definitely, it looks the same when you're using it because I was able to make it look like a drop button, but it's definitely not at all the same under the hood. And I think that if you wanted to make it so that we could define those links in the same way and have the form just render it there naturally, I'd be willing to work on doing that. That's just very different from how it's done right now.
Yep. Yeah. Instead of altering the field UI, it would, like, in my mind, I would think that it would be better if the field UI, when it was rendering the form in the first place, if it knew, or if it had a more like, hey, what are the links I should show for this thing, regardless of whether it was a real field or group or something else, and then it would be able to handle those situations better.
Yeah.
But that is a big ask, that almost starts getting into like making like the title field configurable through field UI and stuff like that, because field UI right now really only deals with fields, and if you introduce groups, which are not fields, you'd also probably, as a consequence, need to think about other fields that aren't fields, like title.
Yeah. And I do think one thing we could do is if we put this group example in core sort of the way it is now, when we got to work on that like move field title issue, we would have the opportunity to say, okay, we're gonna, and I don't know if which issue this should be a part of, but we could say, let's refactor field API to allow these additional kinds of links. We'll use it for title, and then we'll also apply it to field group, and we'll have two different use cases for what it would be like. Where right now we sort of have only one example to work from, and I don't know if what we're doing with field group is going to match what we're going to need to do with title or vice versa. And so it's a little bit hard to make those calls on an API change with only one example to work from.
Yeah, totally. Okay.
And Andy just showed up. Maybe he has opinions.
Yeah, welcome, Andy, Doc Wilmont, to the meeting.
He tried to talk. Go ahead.
Oh, hi. Sorry, that was accidental. Hi, everybody.
Hi.
I'm home with COVID. I forgot, so I've got time today. Recovering though. So
I thought maybe he was watching the live stream and had some vocal opinions he jumped in for, but maybe not.
no, sorry, the wife walked in. I forgot I wasn't muted. Sorry.
All right, well, awesome. Andy, welcome. Justin has also joined us. Welcome to you as well. All right, great. I think we're in a good place there. Talking about field group functionality, that's, definitely exploratory, and we have a lot of things to look at already. Thanks for the work you've done, Jen. Thank you. Yeah, there is a pull request already that you can actually try out and run. Is there a sandbox for it too?
Yeah,
okay,
it's
excellent.
on the pull request. There are some issues I'm still working on, but it does work if you want to just take it first thing.
Yeah, I mean, but with that, is that value? I mean, I get the sense that you're more looking at a code feedback than you are like user test right now.
I also feel like I did change the way it looks.
Okay.
Because I wanted to make it a little bit more coherent with the rest of that field interface. And it would be good to know if those changes are working the way you expect or intuitive.
Okay.
And then as you're using it with this first set of changes, it would also be good to know, like, how strongly do you feel about this random vertical tab at the bottom of the fields page? And do we have possible solutions for that? Because right now, the only recommended solution is remove the feature, which is fine. We could do that. There could be a contrib module that adds it back as a vertical tab if we wanted to keep the code. So for me, like looking at that is sort of like an eyesore. And I'm like, I would much rather not have the feature than just have this huge extra chunk of weird stuff going on this form, because the form is confusing enough anyway. But there are people who might really need that feature. And so that would also be really valuable to have that feedback and be like, no, I really need to like clone the vertical tab from pages onto posts, or I really need to be able to clone the tab from the form to the display, or whatever it is. And that's the feature that we're going to lose by removing that section. So
is there a way to break out some of these like specific, this is going to be a monster issue. I feel like we're going to have 400 issue or comments by the time it's done. Is there a way to break out some of these sub discussions?
I've started doing that. I made a bunch of checkboxes on the like main post, and any one of those things that we feel like needs to have its own discussion could have its own issue and could come as a follow-up to the first one. But that's another thing I could use some help with, is like, how much should I just try and cram in on this issue versus is it something that is going to be, this discussion is going to be a blocking force, and maybe we should separate it out and not include it in this first change.
Would it be helpful to at a future, in the near future, a dev meeting to just actually look at this live, like what you're doing and talk about?
Yeah.
Maybe we should schedule that in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, we could do that next week.
Okay.
If there's time.
So.
Okay.
Okay. Great. All right. Thanks for that update, Jen.
Sure.
Let's see. We've got 9 minutes. That might be enough to discuss this one next issue. It's issue 4569, the issue that Tim has been taking the lead on. Allow admin to hide the title on comments. Tim, you had a question you wanted to ask about that issue. Can you give us a quick overview first and then get into it?
Sure. I'm going to share my screen. I have it set up.
Great.
Oh, I think I'm going to share my screen once again. I'm not sharing my screen now, right? It's
nope, not yet.
I have a feeling that there's a yeah. Bear with me just one more second. Oh, okay. We'll switch. There we go. We're seeing my screen now?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay. So I will quickly scroll up to the top because I think I have some good. The basic thing is that in this was true in Drupal 7 and in Backdrop, when you add comments, it asks you have a choice between automatically generated titles or manually generated titles, but you have to have titles. There's no way to turn these off in core. And so you end up with like short comments where the title is just, it's almost, if somebody said like, I agree, you'd have a title, I agree. And for some types of comments, having titles is really helpful, but in some places, I just don't think it's helpful at all. To me, this often looks broken, and I immediately am trying to figure out how to turn this off. And so there is a contrib module which allows you to hide comments. I opened the issue to allow this in core, and there's been quite a bit of discussion. I think widespread agreement that this is a problem that the fix should be in core, but as I basically took the contrib module solution and tried that out, and then we started running into some issues. And I have two competing approaches right now, and I'm looking for feedback on them. One of them I'm calling kind of the CSS approach, which is that basically what we've added, there's been a little bit of a discussion. So instead of now choosing between custom or automatic titles, you either choose custom, automatic, or no titles. Or it's a sort of a three-way. So the PR switches it from a Boolean field to a choice between three options. And if you choose no titles, the problem we have is how to implement that in the best way, because quite a few contrib themes have overridden the core comment CSS and the core template files. So if I just change it, I could do some changes to the core template files to fix this, but then the feature won't appear in any contrib themes. And I think like half the contrib themes have their own comment template files. So another approach is to use CSS. What we're looking at right now is a screenshot. Originally, where all I did was added a class. If somebody selects hide the titles, I add a class, and with that class, I use CSS to remove the title and replace it with the word permalink. Well, if I do that, then there are some themes, including Bartik. Actually, this would be the core template does this as well as Bartik. Basis does something different. But in the core template, we would end up with two permalink links because one of them is already provided. And we felt like we needed to replace the title with a permalink because Basis, for example, doesn't have a permalink. It just uses the title. So if we just remove the title, then there's no permalink. So this uses CSS to replace it. Now, an improvement on that was to replace, instead of using the word permalink, to have a little icon. So this is a picture of Basis where the title has been removed. It's been replaced with a little link icon that serves as the permalink. Now, those themes that override the template also tend to override the CSS file. So in order to make this work, I had to add a new comment title CSS file in core, or in the comment module in core. So that's a little bit weird, is that now we have two CSS files for comment in order to make this work. The other alternative, and this is my other PR, says we're not going to worry about that. We're just going to make the change. We're going to go ahead and make the change using the existing template and CSS files. But then if we do this, so in this one, I basically just use the template file and the CSS to hide the title, and I go ahead and I add a little link icon. In this case, I had more control. I thought the link icon looked better on the right side than on the left, but we could put it anywhere. But the point is, we're deliberately adding this icon in the Basis template. In the Barkdic or the core template, we just remove the title because there's already a permalink, and I would just leave that. I wouldn't change it because. So yeah, and I mean, I guess basically the decision then is, but the problem here is if we went with the second approach, we have a feature, we have a config option to hide titles. And for a lot of people using contrib themes, they would click that hide titles and nothing would happen. The titles would still be there because they're not getting the template.
I think you also mentioned that a lot of contrib themes just don't show the title regardless of whether there's one at all.
Not a lot.
Also,
not a lot, but at least one or two do, yes. Mm-hmm. Which actually those themes aren't the problem, right? Because we could hide it in the core template and it isn't going to change it there. But that is something to factor, is that, well, yeah, even a theme has the ability to do that, a contrib theme. So we could have this feature that says hide title, and somebody using a contrib theme might say, well, there is no title. It doesn't matter what I do here. There's never a title. So it isn't like this is a new problem. Yeah.
Yeah, so both ways, on sites that hide the title regardless of the setting right now doesn't make sense. And if we introduce a new setting that says hide the title and existing contrib themes don't recognize it, then the setting also won't make sense for them.
Right.
But I think that it only doesn't make sense in both places because the option doesn't exist for them to respect. And so I think by adding the option, then people are like, oh, well, this is, how to respect this option both with and without, and then everybody gets what they want. So the option is, I'm not sure if people are still questioning the value of the option, but it seems like it should be super useful.
Yeah. No, I don't think anybody's arguing that we shouldn't do this. The debate is how to do it the best way. And I would say that the sentiment seems to be leaning towards making the changes to the template files, because that seems the logical place to do it. And then just letting theme developers address this on their own. I feel a little queasy about the idea that there's this hide title option that a lot of contrib themes didn't address, and they didn't, it isn't like they overrode it, right? It's like it wasn't there for them to deal with. And, so some people have sort of said like themes should have the final say. So it's sort of their issue. But that it doesn't seem fair to me to introduce a new feature and then say, well, it's the theme's or developer's responsibility that they didn't address it before it existed. But maybe it's not that big a deal. And I'm sure that like Indigozella maintains several themes that this would affect. And I think she is leaning towards, if I understand her correctly, leaning towards us just changing it in the template, and she would update her themes to reflect that. But we don't know that that's going to happen in all the contrib themes. And and I'd like to stress, this isn't a question of backward compatibility, right? Because this isn't going to affect anybody's site, no matter whether they're using a contrib theme or a core theme, unless they go in and change their configuration. So this only becomes an issue if somebody goes in and decides to hide their titles and they weren't hiding them before. And then one of two things is going to happen. Either with the CSS theme, it's going to, we're going to arbitrarily stick a little icon in there instead of the title, which, may or may not be how the theme developer would have chose to do it. Or nothing's going to happen if we change, and is that acceptable? I see we're at sort of the end of the meeting, but if there's any quick feedback on which way to go, again, I think sentiment is leaning towards just going ahead and changing the templates.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I would be curious about the template changes if those are backwards compatible. Just because if we're changing a template in core and nobody's overridden it, or overridden the template, but people have themed essentially the output that's coming from core, we need to make sure that it isn't actually changing the rendered output, even though the template can be different, which is, it's possible. I just think we need to test it carefully.
Sure. I mean, again, in theory, all it's doing is hiding something that was there. It should be the only change, and only if somebody selects it. So it's the rendered output won't change at all unless somebody hides their titles. And then something is simply removed, right? We're not adding anything. If somebody, for example, did a custom theme, a sub-theming a core theme, I'm not saying that it wouldn't have a negative effect, that it's backward compatible in that sense. It could. It's just that's something I think we can't anticipate and we can't prevent, because anytime we add a new feature, we can never guarantee that it's not going to affect existing themes if existing themes turn on that feature. Right. Yeah. What it shouldn't do is it shouldn't change their site if they don't do anything. And this wouldn't.
Yeah. It's just with when you're changing template files, there are things you can change that would. So we just need to test it and make sure that, I haven't looked at it.
Yeah, that's fair. I've done a fair amount of testing, so I'm reasonably comfortable, but I would love additional eyes on that question.
Okay.
But I mean, I don't even want to do any more testing until I have a sense, like, which, if people feel like this idea of having a feature that just isn't going to show up in core themes is a bad idea, then, we don't even need to test that further. But I'm not hearing anyone, I might be the one most worried about that. And I'm certainly, if everybody else is comfortable, I'm, willing to just go that route.
So just my instinct on the two offers that you recommended are to go with the first one, where the feature still has an effect, but it might not be the effect you expected, where you get the little link icon instead, like the title does disappear and maybe whatever, rather than having nothing change at all.
I lean that way. This feels just the first way with the CSS feels better to me. But I understand the concern. I mean, it feels like, the better way to do it would be to do it in the template, but except for the fact of this, how it's going to affect users. So I'd rather do it the first way, but I'm getting pushback in the other direction, and I'm willing to go either way if there's a consensus.
Yeah. I think from the description that sounds good, but I'll look at the code too, because there could be technical concerns as to why they don't like the CSS approach either. I don't know. Yeah, could review another review for sure.
Well, I mean, one of the flaky things about it is now we've got one more CSS file, which I don't know if that's an issue. So I'll quit sharing my screen. We lost Nate. Did he have to jump out to another meeting?
Yeah, he's got another meeting. Sorry, Martin, I just replied to you instead of everyone. But yeah, I said I can definitely wrap if needed. He has another meeting started at 3.
Okay, well, we can end this. I was curious if he had any to get his feedback on, like, I'd like a core committer, right? If one of these ways just isn't acceptable to Nate or someone else, it would be nice to know.
One thing, just to make sure, is that the link has I'm not sure if it's an image, that it's got suitable tags so screen readers can know what the image is for, what the link is for.
Sure. Well,
which could just be like permalink alt. The title is permalink, just for the image and the URL and for the ahref bit. That it's as simple as that, really. It's just so someone on a screen reader, they don't just see a random image. It's very clear what this image does.
Right.
Yeah, I think the link is the same, right? The CSS change would just like hide the text and show a link icon instead, so the image is actually added from CSS and not from.
Right.
I mean, I'll look at it. I don't know, Tim, you'd know better than me, but that was the impression I got, is that nothing changes except for the CSS swaps it out.
Right. It swaps out the type, basically, and again, I would look, if we go that route, then I want feedback on whether or not I have the best CSS solution. The solution I'm using right now is one of these ones where it just moves the titles 1,000 pixels to the left and then puts in a background image, which may not be the right way to do this. And it, maybe there are accessibility concerns we'd have to address if we went that route. But I didn't want to go too deep into trying to make that system work until I knew that's when I was getting pushback on that system, right? Other people are pushing us in the other direction. So it's like, I'm not going to spend a lot of time trying to make the CSS work if that's going to get rejected anyways. Okay, well, I think we should wrap up the meeting then. So, unless anybody, I mean, I don't think we decided anything here. At the best, I've given more exposure to this discussion. There's no urgency here. This is an issue for the next release, which is still 3 months away. However, I'm advocating for it, and as soon as I can get this one done, there's others I'd like to advocate for. So, the sooner we get this one done, the sooner I can move on to my next big issue. Okay.
That's good.
Okay.
Okay, let's end the meeting then. Bye, everybody. I'm going to